hopefully the others can join in as we go along. So yeah, hi everyone, and welcome to our third Market Insight session of 2023 already. And just before we start, a couple of housekeeping items. Please put your cameras on and so we can see you, and also join in as though it was a real in-person meeting, which is much nicer for everyone than lurking in the background. Also, if you could put your company name alongside your name, that would be really helpful as well, so we can see which companies you're from. And in case it's a while since you've used Zoom and forgotten how to do that, on your picture there's 3 dots, which for me are in the top right hand corner. If you drop down and just go on to rename and pop your company name on there, that would be great. Hopefully you'll have lots of questions as we go along, and so just pop them in the chat, and we've left plenty of time at the end to come back to them. So Australia, we've seen Australia increasingly come onto the radar for UK exporters, especially post-Brexit. You've been casting your nets further afield, and we've seen, I think, people proactively looking to spread their risk across more regions of the world. On the surface of it, Australia looks attractive for UK food and drink companies. We're both in the Commonwealth. We speak roughly the same language. Australians have an affinity with Britain and the Brits. And the UK-Australia trade deal, which is the first one that we will have negotiated from scratch since leaving the EU, should be coming into force this year. But today we're going to look under the bonnet, and we're going to see more of how the nuts and bolts of how the market works, which sales channels are open to you, and what real opportunities and challenges there are. And to help us do that, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome not one but 2 guests today, both beaming in from a sweltering Perth in Western Australia, not Scotland, just in case there's any doubt. So first of all, Warren Barry. Hi, Warren.
Hi,
Warren's the Executive Sales Director at RuLife Group, and he's going to introduce himself and the company in just a second. But for those of you who aren't FDA members, we've got a network of in-market partners around the world who are experts at bringing imported food and drink products to market and working with brands to build their sales on the ground. RuLife is our newest partner. I think we've been an item for a couple of months now, and so we're really excited that today is the first chance that you get to meet RuLife and vice versa. And then Warren's joined today by Dan Helm. Hi, Dan. And Dan is the operations manager at British Provender, and you might recognise Dan or his company name because him and his family have worked with British brands in Australia for over 40 years. So he's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to being successful in the market. So I'm going to hand straight over to you, Warren.
Thanks, Nicola. Yes, and hello everyone. Good morning for you guys. It's 5 o'clock in the evening here, and still 34 degrees. Beautiful weather here at the moment. So what I'm going to walk you through is a presentation that I've done just done recently in London when I was there in October, November, with another channel partner of ours, Santander, which most of you probably know is the big bank, in working with them and their clients on strategies to enter into 2 markets, Australia and China. So what I'll do is if I share this presentation, please don't get too flustered about the amount of detail on this, because Nicola will share this with everyone. But there's quite a few stats and figures on some of these slides. But yeah, as I said, we'll share that with you. So what I'll do is we're going to start off with just a quick introduction on who we are and what we do and our positioning. And then basically what I've got is a whole lot of good stats and figures and recent facts and figures around the food and beverage market in Australia, both online and offline, and looking at the impact of COVID pre and post COVID and how that's changed the market and the landscape for F&B products in particular. And then I'll introduce you to Dan, who's one of our key partners, who's more in the bricks and mortar type space and dealing with what you guys would probably be more excited about in terms of distribution and logistics in some of the major retail outlets. But hopefully after today, you'll get a good appreciation, high level anyway, of the marketplace, both online and offline, for the food and beverage. And then if anyone's interested to talk any further, then I'm more than happy to touch base with anyone after that. In terms of RuLife Group, we're a publicly listed company in Australia. Our core focus really with a big part of the business is we take brands into China. So we do a lot of taking Western brands into China. We have offices in Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, and a place called Guangzhou, which, if people know that, sort of halfway between Shanghai and Beijing. And our whole reason for existing is helping Western brands enter into new markets and hopefully try, provide that as much as we can, a frictionless marketplace in doing that. We help with, obviously, particularly with China. I'll just speak about that for a second. There's a lot of things you have to be aware of in dealing with China. So we like to be seen as the trusted partner, if you like, to help navigate through what a lot of people believe is a minefield, and it is a minefield if you don't do it the right way. But we do help with a whole lot of things in terms of the import, export, getting trademark registration, getting stuff in and out, which is a challenge in itself, warehousing, last mile, and also brand activation and setting up, distribution channels, which I've got a little case study that I'll forward to everyone on that. So, but we do provide a fully integrated solution for brands. And I like to say to clients, just treat it as an a la carte menu, depending on where you are on your journey, what markets you've been in for, how far export ready you are, and what sort of brands you have. So, some brands like a lot, some just like bits and pieces. So it's open up. A big key to our success, though, are channel partners. And I had the pleasure of meeting Nicola, funny enough, on a webinar like this that we did, I think it was back in October last year or September, with Santander, with the view of then coming to London and what I like to call speed dating. It was something like 34 meetings in 4 days through the Santander cloud base, and we've created some good relationships out of that. So there's a bit of a diagram there. I mean, although we're Australian, only 20% of our revenues come from Australia in terms of brands. We represent brands from the UK, good fashion brands out of the UK. We do a lot of health and wellbeing, cosmetics out of the US. We represent the largest pharmaceutical brands in New Zealand. And we do a lot of fresh food and produce as well. So one of our claims to fame is we're in the top 5 avocado importers into China. We do about $5-6 million worth of that a year. Our key areas for export and helping brands get in, the 3 down the bottom there are China, Australia, and ASEAN. Now I'll get more onto the Australian side. Our business that focuses on all the Australian side of what we do is Choose Digital, and Choose Digital is fully owned subsidiary of the Real Life Group. And Choose exists really for 3 or 4 reasons. One is we're very good at driving sales online for brands, driving foot traffic into store if it's more of a retail bricks and mortar type business, building communities around brands, and also setting up channels and sales distribution for new entrant businesses coming into Australia. As I said, we're established about 2005. There isn't a market, I'd have to say. I didn't have grey hair when I started back in 2005, but there wouldn't be a market or an industry I don't think we've touched one way or the other in the last 18, 20 years. And we've built up a pretty good business and some good case studies that I will forward to you at the end so you can peruse in your own time. The key thing, though, and why that little graphic is there on the thing there, is we're all about ROI and we're all about data and analytics, particularly when it comes to the online business. So what's in it for you guys is a sort of our standard sort of engagement is looking at for key brands is looking at what's the feasibility of the market for you first and foremost, in terms of, we can do a lot of market research, do a lot of analysis, and out of that build out a roadmap that says, here's what your entry strategy looks like, and here's what it could cost, and here's what revenues you could be expected to drive. So you've got a fully fledged business strategy that's fully costed with all the things you need to know prior to entry. And that might even be a yes or no park for 12 months. We have a lot of that, but it's always better to have an informed decision before going in. And particularly with Australia, obviously we live here, we're here, and we've got a number of key relationships like British Provender, British Chamber of Commerce, a whole lot of different people that are all UK focused and UK centric. And it's dealing with the right people to help brands get in. Some by way of example, as I said, we've got an eclectic mix of different clients. None better than Tupperware. I don't even know if that still exists, but that was a client we had for 20 odd years. We're very strong in health and wellbeing. We've got a lot in the drink space, particularly in China. Our biggest client is an Australian client which you do have in the UK, called Remedy, which is kombucha. So that's a big opportunity in China and big here in Australia. And yeah, we've done a lot in the food and bev space, particularly around honey. and a lot of things like that. So, you know, as I said, there's not a sort of vertical we haven't touched over the journey. So that's just a bit of background on us and what we do. Now what I thought I'd do is just provide what does the marketplace look like for food and beverage, very high level snapshot. Once again, don't get too fussed about the details on some of these slides. I'll talk to them, not at them, and we'll share this with you at the end. But I suppose in terms of the macro view, when you look at, we have a big company here, which some of you may well be aware of, CSIRO. You know, they did a study back in 2019 on the food and beverage market and estimated that it being $13.8 billion by 2030. I think what we've seen over the last 2 years and with the growth, particularly in certain sectors with the impact of COVID, is, you know, the impression is that it could be a lot bigger than that. And they're estimating around 15.5 to 16 billion by the end of next year. So it is a sizable market. Bear in mind, we're only a small country. We're a big country, but a small population. We're only about 27 million strong. So, you know, that's quite a big budget for us. But, you know, there's strong ties with the UK. And I think the timing is great between Australia and the UK, obviously with the impending signing of the trade agreements, which we expect to be signed by the end of Feb, you know, and then signed off by King Charles by the end of March, so in market around April. So that's going to open up a lot of conversations to do that. UK is Australia's 8th largest trading partner, and, you know, it's on bilateral trades alone, it's an $815 billion industry. So, you know, they're massive numbers, you know, and Australia and the UK are used to trading. So there's a lot going on there. On this slide here, then, just getting a little bit more granular, is when you look at generically, the exports from the UK to Australia and New Zealand holistically have doubled year on year for the last decade. And, you know, in the food and bev space in particular, you know, you're looking around about 484 million on that. The top 5 products, when this research was done a year or so ago, we love our drink down here. So whiskey is a big one, gin. We like our savouries as well. So savouries is a big one there. You can see the numbers in the table. And then everyone's got sweet tooths over here as well. So we're very big in those types of products. You know, in terms of Australia itself, we're the third largest economy, but one of the wealthiest economies. You know, we you know, per capita, you know, we're one of the richest in the world. Up until, I would like to have said 9 months ago, we've got a lot of disposable income, but a little bit like you guys, we've got high inflation. They're cramping down big time on interest rates with us, so they're trying to squeeze us a little bit. And we've had 9 interest rate rises in 9 consecutive months, and another one due in February to try and curtail the inflation. But we're still spending. Record Christmas, record January, but it will slow up a little bit. But just means we have to spend our money a little bit wiser. So we're a long way away. If anyone's had the pleasure of coming to Australia, you know, it takes about a day of your life to get here. And I've done it a few times to the UK, but, you know, some of the challenges you're up for, and some of these are, you know, are Captain Obvious type things in terms of it's no different to any market. You've got to build your brand. You know, there's no point coming in here and expecting just because you're a leading brand in a certain country that it will just kick off. So you need to do a bit of homework first and see who the players are and build out your brand and get that activation going. The UK is in big favour at the moment because everyone's hooked on The Crown, everyone's hooked on Bridgetown Abbey and all those type of shows. So everyone loves those sort of things. So we're talking to a number of tea brands at the moment around those type of things as well. But it is all about ascertaining what channels work best for you, and that's what the research would uncover. Obviously, the challenges are there, but, you know, I think with the UK and Oz trade agreement being signed shortly, that will help with a lot of that, albeit it's not massive changes, but I think it's more of a mindset than anything else that the doors are open for trade. But I think the biggest challenge is that tyranny of distance. I mean, it is a long way, and as you all probably have experienced over the last 2 years, the costs, particularly through supply chain management, have increased significantly. So there's ways around that, and there's ways of, and Dan will probably talk a little bit more about that in terms of how you group different products together and, you know, share in certain costs when entering the market and the warehousing and all that. We can help with all that. We do have a big labour shortage here in Australia as well. So now that the borders are finally open, and Perth was one of the last cities in the world to open up because we were big in iron ore and we didn't want to risk that. So first world problem internally within the state, but we only opened up, I think it was May last year. in terms of opening up that, but it has had a massive impact on labour. Some other big things in here, which I'll get to in a minute, is Australians have over the last 12 to 18 months become very big on provenance and become very big on traceability. So there's some of these little things you need to be aware of when entering the Australian market. As I said, inflation's high, and the new one that's about to kick us in the butt again now is energy prices are about to increase, and that's both in gas and electricity. The one thing we do have down here is a lot of sun, so therefore a lot of houses are on solar, so we sort of mitigate a lot of that, and the government does give a lot of rebates in there. But they're just some of the challenges. You're probably aware of 80% of them, but just to be aware of entering the Australian market. But when you look at the opportunity, once again, some of these it's no different to what market you're entering into. Digitisation, first and foremost, and bringing out your brand and being made aware and tracking all that is important, particularly for a new entrant. But some of the ones we've seen growth over the last 18 months, particularly with COVID, we're very big on home delivery. We're very big on, hampers and food and preparation kits, food kits, meals, ready-made meals are very big in Australia. And there's quite a few companies that have listed over the last 18 months that have forged on that, and delivery of fresh food to the door, and the frequency of that has increased significantly, to the point where one of our biggest players, if you're aware of them, Woolworths, like Sainsbury's, I suppose, or similar to Marks and Spencer's in some degree, they've now opened up the drive-through shopping and all that sort of stuff. So that's a big market. Demand for non-alcoholic drinks is very big. Endeavour Group is the biggest player, one of the biggest players here in Australia, who own BWS and Dan Murphy's in terms of drinks, and they've seen growth 83% year on year for the last couple of years. I hate to say it, but it was, and I suspect it's no different to England, that during COVID we drank far too much. A lot of people did do that, so I think that's probably helped skew those numbers somewhat, but I think it's probably reset a lot of people in a lot of their habits and behaviours. Also, what's become very big over here is plant-based and proteins. It's a massive market at the moment, and the rate of that take-up has been quite significant over the last 18 months. So there's a couple of little things in there. Just on those 4 or 5 things alone, you're looking at about $5 billion worth of value add in terms of opportunities. But when you maximise, some of the things to think about with Australians, we're pretty laid back folk. We're pretty simple. We're like everyone else. We like value for money. But some things, because of the tyranny of distance, something that's a little bit unique, more times than not, we're used to waiting. So we're not like the Chinese market that want it delivered tomorrow when they order something. We're used to waiting. We understand that. We're a very multicultural country. So we're used to buying things from overseas and have a strong attraction for that, which I'll get into a couple of little stats on that in a second. But, the brands that have been seen to be by the public helping and looking after customers and consumers during the pandemic is high on the radar here in Australia, as is sustainable packaging, and anything to do with the environment is very big here now. So, and I doubt whether that's any different to where you are over in the UK. There's a big groundswell around all this enviro-friendly sustainability, and as I said before, the real concerns on traceability. And the traceability aspects aren't going to go anywhere but up. The whole thing around provenance and people being able to track not just the journey through the supply chain, through the end door, but where do the products come from, where are they sourced from, so people understand exactly what they're buying off shelf. And we have a platform and some technology simply driven through QR codes that enable people to investigate products on shelf, click here, buy now, bottle of wine on someone's table that they're sharing with friends. It's become mainstream nowadays. So linking your traceability, your provenance to a point of sale and a whole logistics thing is where this will all be going, if not happening already. So that's just a quick macro level. I suppose now this is where the data comes a little bit more granular. So please don't get too scared. As I said, we'll share this with you, but just want to give you some quick insights and some little gold nuggets that I think might be of interest to a lot of you. But these are some of the facts that matter. So when you look at online versus offline, we've had a strong growth, and you always got to take this with a pinch of salt, particularly with digital, that, the last 2 years haven't been a normal 2 years, and I suspect that every market has seen a massive spike in digital and online. But I think what you do take from that, the blue bit is offline, the orange bits are online, for those that can't see it that well. But, it has changed people's behaviours and their consumption habits. and even brought the older demographics in a lot more, which you'll see in a second. The main devices used here is mobile. You've got to be mobile conscious here. And you can see in those slides there that, out of all those stats there, about 40% of all purchases are done via mobile here in Australia. When we now look at the industries, right? So these graphs, for those that can't see it too well, there's 8 different industries on these columns here, breaking it up into industry growth. So on the left, the light blue is food and the orange is beverage. So you can see it's quite significant, particularly in the beverage space. And then on the right-hand side, it's the same again, blue being food and beverages in terms of the value in terms of billions. As you can see by the numbers on the right-hand side, the biggest industry by a mile online is fashion. And that's quite a significant business. But particularly in online now, the food and beverage, particularly in grocery, is growing significantly year on year. One market that surprised me that I think once again has been influenced by COVID, and we've seen the same in China, funny enough, is outdoor furniture, sports equipment, anything to do with health and activities and hobbies has had a real big spike over the last 18 months. Top level numbers here. Australians spent $56 billion in retail last year, and 14.5% of that was online retail. So, it's a massive market, whichever way you look at it. And it just, particularly as a new entrant coming in, I think where the digital space plays, it helps in launching your brand. You're not going to lose an arm and a leg over doing that if you did it the right way, the measured approach, but you use that as you're running in parallel when you're knocking on the doors like Dan, who helps with getting you into the Woolworths, the Coles and the main distribution, but they both need to be working in parallel for a successful entry, in our opinion. When you look at the frequency of shoppers now, 83% of online shoppers are shopping every month as a minimum, but it has picked up significantly in terms of frequency. I've got 3 daughters over 19, 20, and there wouldn't be a day goes by nowadays where there isn't a knock at the door with a parcel or some sorts of something at our front door. It has become mainstream, and this isn't going to go anywhere but up. Even the older demographics you'll see in a moment are now shopping online and more frequent. In terms of retail, though, you can see that online retail, non-grocery, we're around the 70% mark, and even in the 60+ demographic, you got 51%. Online grocery shopping, as I said, that's been a big push here because it's of convenience. It's about getting fresh food. People are returning, although it's been some time since COVID's been lifted. Perth is probably back to normal in every regard. Car parking is always a good indication of that. The main city, up until about 3 months ago, was still very vacant, and a lot of people were incentivised to come back into the city. But nowadays, you can see, I think a lot of people have been attracted to online as a way of buying not just groceries, but stuff online, and that sort of seeded the new era of where people are going, and even in the older demographics. In terms of frequency, as you can see there, obviously, what that slide tells you is since the onset of COVID, and I would think this is obvious, that, the orange bit, 17% of people have increased their online spend significantly, and 30% increased somewhat. The black one is people, that probably were already shopping online, but I suggest that the orange, the 17% online retail and the 36%, a good portion of those are people that weren't buying online and were forced to buy online because of COVID. So you can see that online is a significant place here in this, and I doubt whether it's any different in the UK. In terms of restrictions and the influence of shopping behaviour, 55%. This, to be fair, this was done back in September, October last year. 55% returned to online shopping, but 47% are more likely to buy from companies that they believe behaved well during the pandemic, which I think is an important thing. So I don't know if you've noticed or you have on your own packaging and all those type of things. A lot of people are now putting on there all those the environmentally friendly eco type things, which a lot of customers are now looking for. So it's important to bear that in mind. In terms of buying online, as I said, I've sort of said this before, but this is a slide that we will hand to you because each section will mean something different to each of you because you all come from different sectors. But you can see there that this slide's just all about which sectors are are the biggest online. As I said, clothing, fashion, shoes is big. Shoes, particularly with the 18 to 25-year-olds, the secondary markets of shoes is a massive market in itself, where kids outgrow their shoes and then they're paying more for secondhand shoes than they are for the new shoes. It's just insane, some of these marketplaces that have been created. But you can see on the right-hand side there, what it was like prior to COVID and then post-COVID, and which sectors appeal to you. As I said, you'll get all this information. Some of the key markets online particularly, there'll be some that are very familiar to you. I mean, the big ones, the big marketplaces online, as we would call them, eBay and Amazon are still dominate in this space. The big offline ones, and Dan will talk more to that, our big ones are Woolworths, Coles, particularly when it comes to grocery and foods. But when you're looking at home accessories and electronics and those type of things, then the ones here are JB Hi-Fi, Better Home Living, Harvey Norman's, they're all Kogan's, they're all big ones in this space. But you can see it's highly dominated by the top 10 really here in Australia, and getting into them is Dan's area of expertise. In terms of convenience, so this is just, I suppose, to give you a little bit of inside the mindset of the Australian consumer, in terms of 50% are prepared to pay more for products that make their life easier. 67%, as it says there, are buying from brands for the first time. So I put this up deliberately because for those that are entering into the new market, Australians do have an appetite, the brand seekers, to be a little bit more adventurous in new brands. So I think that stat alone is important for a new brand entry. And the way that we advise brands normally is, if you believe the narrative that we're willing to wait, we're willing to explore, we're willing to pay a premium, and we understand shipping, particularly when it comes to online, then digital has a very strong positioning in that. And then that obviously builds out to your trust and your brand from there. I won't talk too much about that one. I've spoken that one. Once again, here's some stats backing up what I've said previously in terms of the authenticity and sustainability of that. You can see almost half of people are now looking at that as an important. Don't be too scared by the 64% like buying Australian. I think that is a furphy buy Australian because it's got a green kangaroo on it. As I said, we're one of the most multinational countries in the world. We have a strong import. We like new brands. Yes, we do like Australian brands, but we don't get a lot of things here, so we do have a strong appetite for overseas brands, as this does here. This, when I refer to direct brand shopping, this is what I would be thinking of as an early strategy for any new brand entering. If your brand's well known, it's about tapping into all your digital assets now as you launch into Australia. No doubt you'll all have websites, you'll all have Instagram, you'll all have Facebook, varying versions of those type of things, Amazon stores, whatever it might be, apps. It's all about how we leverage what you've already invested in other markets and what you've got, and building out an Australian consumer journey that leads to that without having to invest too much money as a means of testing the market to see if your brand stands up and see if people are willing to buy. But you can see there what this graph shows you is half of the population are willing to try new brands and open up to new brands. And once they do, the repeat purchase is considerable. Then when you further down, 53% skewed women, 47% men. And on the right-hand side, it's got the frequency of purchases there, depending on what vertical you're in. 30 to 39-year-olds, I'd say 18 to 40-year-olds, wouldn't be too much different to where you are. Strong appetite for online, strong appetite for new brands. Look at me type purchases. And then sharing and word-of-mouth marketing is big. Once again, here's just some stats that support what I've said before about the ethical and sustainable propositions that resonate with shoppers here. It is a big thing. And I've seen a massive change in consumer thinking and behaviour since COVID over the last 12 months, and the reaction of consumers around those brands that acted the right way during COVID. Of all those brands as well, the traditional stuff that I like to say is, how do you capture, how do you build a database, how do you drive ongoing sales is no different to what you'd be doing now in certain degrees in terms of, building loyalty and building retention and how you remain connected amongst that. So, 4 in 10 direct brand shoppers. So the reason I put this one up here again is these normally are brand shoppers are, yes, identified brands they're used to, but brands that they don't get access to here in Australia. they'll seek you out as long as you've got the right presence online in the first instance, and will sign up and will become, hopefully loyal and prosperous customers. So that's a lot. I mean, that was just a quick snapshot of the micro market, getting down into some of the verticals. I suppose when you look at the 5 key takeaways we're looking at here, there is steady growth in online retail, and I think the word steady is probably not doing it a service. It's massive, and I think it's going to go nowhere but up, and that will deliver on that. We're strong on convenience and value for money, and multiple channels. All right, they really need to look at that. And as I said before, we're a little bit different than a lot of other shoppers because of the tyranny of distance. We're used to waiting. We're used to paying more times than not for small purchases. We're used to paying for shipping, albeit there's a lot of ways around that we can help do that. Retailers should always, like you do anywhere else, look at amplifying your communication through multiple channels and really getting down to your USP and what you stand for. And there's just some key points there to take away. That slide there I won't go through now. Suffice to say, when you get this, is the model, and this is the inroads into Dan now, is to say what we like to do through our relationships with Santander, FDEA, and British Chamber of Commerce is work with like-minded people who are export ready or exploring export, and help with every single aspect of that journey: entry, warehousing, distribution, working with key partners to get on shelf, working with your brand activation, and also helping you with as being an extension of your sales team if that's what you need, if you don't have any local representation here on the ground, and just being seen as an extension, if you like, of your company, but doing it in a measured approach so that you can test it all along the way, and take a sensible approach. And it all starts with the research, right? In terms of understanding the market that you're getting into, and getting a proper plan and approach before you jump in, boots and all. At the end of all this, there is a few case studies in there, in terms of, this is just a little one here, Bruny Island cheese, just as an example. So Bruny Island cheese, I have a bit of a joke about this, but Australia, so Australia's an island. Tasmania is off Australia, so that's an island off an island. And Bruny Island cheese is off Tasmania. So it's an island off an island off an island. A very, very little brand. They spent $18,000 and they got $166,000 return just by packaging up and having some of those key elements in terms of shipping. And it's just a cheese. To be fair, probably a well-known cheese in Melbourne, but the geo-targeting of these sales, geo-targeting around the right consumer who's open to your products and all that does work well. Then we've got a whole lot of history here, which I'm just going to flick through just to give you the view, but you can look at it in your own time. Remedy is one in here that we've put. This is more China focused, but looking at all the things we've done in getting them into gyms, getting them into retail outlets, getting them into major chains, the sales process gives you a lot of information on our approach, the connections that we have. This slide here in particular is getting them into the main shops like Olay, which is a massive shopping chain in China. Audi, funny enough, is a premium brand because it's mostly Western brands in China. He's getting the shop front, and that's all after the first 12 months. And these are the sort of things we do here on the ground with Dan and partners like that in terms of getting you on there. So that was a lot of information, I know, but just wanted to sort of paint the picture and set the scene in terms of, I suppose, the market in the first instance. What's the average consumer look like here? What are we thinking? What's changed? Some raw stats that might help you with your thinking. And then, lead into Dan now, who will talk more of, the 40 years history that his family's had in actually doing a lot of this stuff and bringing UK brands into Australia.
Thanks, Warren. Good segue. Thanks, all the members and FDEA community here for having us talk for the afternoon. Morning for you guys. There's a whole history that British Provender has with importing and wholesaling British brands within Australia. A lot of yourselves already have your own brand presence in Australia already, and let's be realistic. We're one of many that do this job in Australia, and there's people who do it very differently. There's people who do it better. There's people who do it worse. There's all sorts. There's a million. I mean, the relationships between Australia and the UK go back for forever. So there's no There's no one shoe fits all on how to distribute from the UK to Australia. So a little bit on how British Prominter does it. So we're about 40 years running for imports from the UK to Australia. Obviously, I'm too young to remember the business side of things when Dad kicked off, although I might be able to tell stories about building cardboard carton castles in the back corner of the warehouse. So the business that British Prominter does, it's mostly focused on UK goods. There's a little bit of European flavour to us, and we're expanding into Indian ethnic channels in the near future, or as of yesterday, actually. So how does the distribution model work in Australia? The history for the UK piece and the reason that the Perth presence, we're based in Perth anyway, it's because of the high density demographic for the UK population. So there's a question there in the chat, which is spot on. It's all about what are the costs of distribution to the different corners of Australia, and that's a function. Like, how do you actually get stock from one corner of Australia to another? And I had a great conversation with one of our good partners, AG Bars, a few years ago, and the conversation is, why don't you get stock to there's a group right in the far north of Queensland. Why haven't you got stock into that group up there? And the answer is, it's the same as asking, why doesn't Glasgow service direct to Moscow? How come you haven't got into those chains over there? That's the sort of distance challenge that you're looking at, and not all partners can cover all corners of Australia all of the time. So British Prominter is Perth-based. We have a great high-density demographic of expatriate population here, and there's real comps of expatriate community here for UK folk. That's not to say there's more British folk in Perth or Western Australia than there are in the other states. It's just about the density. It's about that high density population. So you can get some brand growth for brands that are recognised from the UK, either old historical brands or new, more modern brands. You can get some of that penetration, and you can get that volume of movement, that volume of stock movement that lets you turn over, lets you continue import, and lets you place those second and third orders. But there's other models to do it. So retail industry in Australia. Warren's gone over what the e-commerce market looks like and the great growth numbers look like in Australia for e-commerce. But you're growing off a baseline of almost zero about 5 years ago. Like, Amazon didn't do e-commerce. Coles and Woolworths delivery service was absolutely hopeless. COVID accelerated that hard. So all of a sudden, e-commerce became a real option for Australia, and all of the online retailers got better at it through that period. It doesn't change the fact but that the grocery market's still sort of 70% Coles and Woolworths. So you pick and choose how big you want to be in Australia and how you want to tackle those prospects. And I'll go through a little bit of a flowchart that British Prominter uses for how we talk through suppliers on what their market might look like, what their aspirations might look like, how small they want to start or how big they want to start when they're looking at Australian retail trade. So that 70% that's Coles and Woolworths based, I mean, you can't ignore that. Feet on the floor, you can't ignore that there's people moving through, there's floor traffic, and you've got stock on the shelf. And some of you guys have got your brands in Coles and Woolworths already. So you know the sort of terms you're looking at, and I mean, terms on top of terms on top of terms for some of these folk, but that also sets where your price point needs to be when you enter into the market. Which retailers do you want to target from the outset? But then there's other avenues. So Metcash, Aldi, Costco, they're all players in the market. They all give you a footprint. They all let your brand presence grow. So all of the marketing expense that you might try to spend in Australia doesn't count for anything if you haven't got some presence on the shelf. Where does the consumer buy it from? Is it just an online presence? Because that's available and that works. You can have marketing spend for just stuff that's on an online presence these days. Historically, but if you were going to spend big on marketing, it needed to be based, you need to have it in Coles and Woolworths, so it got that distribution. There's 2,000 stores between them, covering all of the major population base. The other option, and British Prominter has always utilised it, we won't ever let it go, because the day we let it go, someone will do it better than us and turn up with our other customers and do it as well. So your other option is the independent trade. The small supermarkets, the multiple store owners around the country, the chains of 50 stores, the chains of 10 stores, They're based all over the country, and they all have their specialty areas. So British is not necessarily the key demographic in, say, in the heart of Melbourne. Certainly, it's not the key demographic there. But you've got the Ritchie's chain and supermarket groups like that you want a presence in. You need to be able to put your product on the shelf in there to have people walking through, seeing your stock, even if it's for uplift periods, even if it's for seasonal occasions. Now, there's ways of distributing to those. It's not all just through distribution centres. So there's a number of smaller wholesalers like British Promoter, and we all use similar service. But rather than having a distribution centre in each state of Australia, we have a single distribution centre. We have sales team members all over the country. They take in orders. Orders are coming back to your head office, picked, packed, dispatched, consolidated and sent across the country, deconsolidated and distributed to store by dedicated companies who do that distribution service to supermarket back docks. So there's a number of models of how your distribution service works. So let me talk about a new product, or what our process for working through a new product is, and how we work with suppliers to understand, is my brand right for Australia? Is it right for all of Australia? Because like Western Australia, for example, has very strict honey regulations that preclude a lot of honey products from coming into West Australian because our bees are precious. I can go into these sort of legislative pieces all day. So first thing, new product, compliance standards. Is it going to comply? First and foremost, does it comply? Can we make it compliant? What are the labelling requirements going to need? Because everything from nutritional panels to import details to country of origin legislation has to go on those nutritional panels. That's every single product needs its own, every single jar of everything needs its own nutritional panel reworked for Australia. Can the manufacturer do that for Australian market? Is the market big enough? Or do you want to start small and run with a stickering service? Certainly, I didn't envisage my life being creating nutritional panels for British products, but I do spend quite a bit of my time generating nutritional panels for stickers. Second one's date code capabilities. We get some great products across our desk, but they just don't have the long-term date code that's going to make them viable for the 3-month travel. And yeah, it might be 8 weeks, or in the middle of COVID, it might be 16 weeks. Always like to base yourself on 12 weeks to get from port in UK to location in Australia. It gives you a bit of time up your sleeve in case Singapore plays funny buggers with your shipment on the way through, or Malaysia, or any of the other transshipment ports. Nearly everything transships these days to Australia. So 12 weeks is a great time. So does your product have 12 weeks shipping time on it, plus still have 50% of manufactured life on it to get it into Coles and Woolworths DCs? Anything with less than 7 months is almost impossible. 9 months is tricky. 12 months is where you need to be on your date codes. If you're working on less than that, it's a tough ask. Is your brand iconic, nostalgic brand that a UK expat is going to love? That's where British Promoter finds its piece. And there's one of us in every country of the world. We're really playing on that nostalgia piece. It's not so much about mainstream plays for a company like British Promoter. We do have the occasional wins with mainstream, but we're really about that nostalgic brand. Someone's looking for that taste of home, and we've got it covered across the country for that. So if you're looking for a nostalgic brand, is it a core SKU or is it a range extension? And I'm going to use my Premier Foods example of Ambrosia, because they do all sorts of great range extensions from the Ambrosia, but it's still the core. It's the Ambrosia cream rice or Devon custard that you can sell. All the other range extensions, yeah, sure, they're fantastic. And in the UK, where the marketing expert is being put into it and all that spend is being put into it, that's good. But the old, the expat who moved out here in the 70s or 80s, he doesn't know these new products. He's looking for that, he or she's looking for that old style brand and the taste of home. So really, you get 80% of your sales through those core SKUs or the old style ones. So those nostalgic brands, they can get a home in the international aisle, or what we call the ethnic international aisle. The international space grew from Coles and Woolworths treat them all the same now, but the international space used to be all about the Mexican aisle and the Mexican home cooking kits and the Italian home cooking kits and Pataks and Sharwood's curry sauces. They've sort of grown them to be more, because of how multicultural Australia is, there's a dedicated ethnic space for each country across the globe, and the UK has the greatest presence in the most number of Coles and Woolworths stores with that ethnic international space for UK. but I'm trying to fit a whole Tesco supermarket into that little space. It's not a, it's a 3-foot space, and I'm trying to fit one of every product. And years ago, they moved to one product from each brand. There might be 3 or 4 great SKUs, but in 3 foot of space, they've got enough space for one product from each brand. So if a manufacturer is looking for British Barometer to get space in there, what am I going to bump out? What am I going to negotiate? So being honest with ourselves is, okay, is this product going to knock double deckers on the shelf? Is it going to outsell Whisper bars? Is it going to outsell Iron Brew? In that case, yes, we can look at putting these into the space. But if it's not, then it's not realistic for British Barometer to put that forward to Coles and Woolworths and say, I'm doing the wrong thing by the category if I'm doing that. Other options, are you looking at a exciting new product development? Is it something that you want to take over the mainstream category for, be it biscuits, be it cordials, SHS, good job with the cordials. Is it one of those products that you're going to break into mainstream straight away? If it is, have you got your whole range? Because one single product gets lost on the shelves here. Have you got 3 or 4 SKUs to make you to brand block? What are your selling points? Is there going to be brand recognition? Where do you want to target? Is it Coles, Woolworths? Is it going for Aldi? Is it going for special buy occasions in Aldi, which are great uplifts a few times a year? Is it going for Costco? Have you got the right pack presentation for Costco? Or is it something smaller again? Is it a boutique brand that you want to see into a David Jones or a Harris Farm Markets? Is it one of those brands that you know where your boutique brand sits? It's not going to be in mainstream. It's not necessarily going to be in the international aisle, but is it going to be out to your boutique IGA stores? It's about being realistic on where that piece sits. And then the next piece, how big do you want to start? If you want full 40-foot container loads from the outset, are you willing to make the investment up front? Are you going to take the risk out of it for the distributor? Or do you have listings in place first? Are you going to put the investment into those listings? There's always listing fees hidden under various names of, I've forgotten the latest name I got, but yeah, there's always listing fees for every SKU. Horlicks is on its way into mainstream shortly. That hasn't been cheap to get into there. Unilever's had to finance a good marketing effort to find its way back into mainstream after it lost its place in the market a few years ago. So then with all of that taken into account, we're realistic about where we want to be, where we want to see our products, how big we want to be to start with. Then we look at costings. Can your product consolidate in the UK? Have you got a distributor for Australia who's already consolidating in the UK? Are you going to look to consolidate? Have you got products that consolidate well? Because as good as British Air is, no one wants to ship it. Okay, I'd rather be packing something on top of it, something underneath it. Have we got something you can consolidate? Have you got your freight costs factored in? And no one knew what was going to happen with freight costs a few years ago, so no one was insulated against the sort of freight expenses that everyone wore getting from the UK to Australia. When I'm shipping Rolo bars, I can spread that cost across a million bars per container. If I'm shipping Range Rovers, and this is where the Department of International Trade's squealing, like they've only got a few per container. There's a big cost on that that's come from the freight component of goods. Monster Munch, everyone loves Monster Munch in Australia, but I can only fit 1,000 cartons in a container, and it's $10 a carton. It's straight away. That's the extra freight cost. It just jacks up fast. So think about freight costs. Finally, the tops come off the freight. From the UK to Australia, and availability of vessels and containers is starting to ease up a little bit, but that's been a long 18 months that we've struggled badly with equipment. Delays. Does your date code support delays? Transshipment ports always throw delays in the mix. Have you got time? Have you got the expertise to do the stickering in Australia? Have you got the people on the ground who can do the stickering, whether it be inkjet labelling or stickering? The Australian compliance piece, everyone has to operate under the Imported Foods Inspection Scheme, which means there's random inspections on your goods coming in. That can be a 2-week delay when it gets here. I've got a container load of Jamie Dodgers down here waiting for an inspection that I just can't get it done at the moment. Warehousing. Has someone got the right warehousing for your product? Have you got temperature control for anything chocolate based? Think about it. The UK chocolate has no preservatives in it compared to Australian chocolates. It's all about the temperature that the product's designed to sit in. So has someone got temperature control to manage your goods properly? Have they got distribution across the country? What's their distribution set up for your proposed distributors? Have they got someone who can cover the whole country? The backloading rates to get stock to Western Australia are, well, the freight rates to get stock from Eastern Coast to Western Australia is something like $500 a pallet. To get back from Western Australia to the East is about $250 a pallet, because we're a net importer and everyone wants to get their equipment back the other way. Have you taken into account what your terms of trade are? Do you want to aim to the top of the tree? Do you want your retail point to cover the top of the tree on terms of trade, or do you want to start lower? If you want to start at a discount retailer, then your terms of trade are you're never going to get your retail price right to get to Woolworths, who have the highest terms of trade in the country. Start with Woolworths and work backwards from there. That's our advice to you, because you never find your way back to Woolworths if you're starting at the wrong end with retail point. Activation costs, have you got them factored in? Have you got your terms factored in? Start with Woolworths terms. Marketing, how much do you want to spend on marketing? If you spend all out on marketing, has someone got it available? There's no point in spending a mountain on marketing if you can't get your product out on the shelf or to someone's door through online options. Have you got your terms figured out? Because there's terms on top of terms on top of terms. I suggest starting with Woolworths. I harp on about this, guys, because international markets are different with terms. You want to look at 40% retailer terms before you even get started. That's without promotions factored in. You need to be somewhere on that 40%. And then promotional costs. Figure out with your distributor up front how they're going to fund promotions. Everyone who knows what they're doing is either funding promotions from the distributor margin and expect them to put a margin on that accommodates terms, or you're going to run a model that you take the claims back for promotional activity. You want to be looking at once a month. It depends what your date code is and what your turnover is going to be, but you want to expect once a month promotion, and you want to expect that you're going to have, during your peak seasonal uplift, you want to be cutting down to sort of 40 or even 50% promotion. The retailers will share some of that value for you if you negotiate that right. That's all I had in terms of talking points. I'm here for a little bit longer. Thank you again for giving me a chance to talk. But I'm here for questions if anyone's got any.
That's great, Dan and Warren. Thank you both so much. That's really, really insightful. And it's always great to hear it, straight from the horse's mouth, Dan, and in terms of, all your experience on the ground and the, you've seen what works and what doesn't work. I think we did have a couple of questions. I know you've got to shoot off. So, Nitesh, you had some questions. Do you want to ask them, or do you want me to read them out of the chat?
Yeah, no, that was in terms of mainstream, the mainstream retailers, Woolies and Coles and etc. How much they really look at brands, kind of social media, and how brands are being represented in social media, and how that creates, is that something that that they look at when it comes to considering products to
They like to see a brand presence in Australia. Certainly, they'd like to see a brand presence in Australia beforehand, but both Coles and Woolworths have an opportunity to invest in their own marketing internal schemes, which is another way of saying activation costs.
Just more money,
But if you look to one or the other initially coming from the UK, then they'll ask for an exclusivity arrangement, and you want to be investing in your own social media marketing locally, as well as investing in theirs, which is non-optional.
Yeah, I think the other element to that, Natish, is as part of your own brand entering into the market as well, as in terms of your own feasibility. So I think what digital provides for in the first instance is the ability to measure, I suppose, one, because all the data is available for you in a very short period of time to understand how well or how attractive your brand is to consumers first and foremost. And then before you go, do knock on the doors of the retailers and distributors, be armed with certain statistics and data that on conversions to sales and all that sort of stuff. It gives you a fair idea, I think, of probability of success, for the want of a better word, in terms of entering into the Australian market, because the Woolworths one will take some time. You will have to have identified your brand. And the more information that you can provide that the consumers are interested in you and are buying from you, which you can do easily in the first instance, in the first 90, 120 days. Just gathering some intelligence and data to support your entry strategy, I think is a good thing.
Okay. And just playing on that in terms of using a Sprat to catch a mackerel as such, and using that online channel to really develop the consumer proposition and the consumer demand. Just from a regulatory perspective, how does that work with regards to Australian food labeling laws in terms of, is there breaks? So I know, like for the US, there is a break that if you're doing less than 300,000 or something, then you don't have to abide by, you don't have to do 100% of the US nutritional labeling, etc. So from an investment perspective, how does that play out? Is that, do the Australian Food and Drug Administration have the same kind of limits?
No, that would be heaven on a stick if somebody would implement that law, and I might find someone to listen to me about that story. So the best example I can give is that we do a quite extensive Christmas catalogue every year, and in recent years, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've had to pare back the offering that we make, because sometimes you'll get one carton order for I'm not gonna name names, but you'll get a one carton from some exotic little cottage supplier, and you'll get 2 cartons of some other product, and you'll get 20 cartons, and everything else you're doing is 1,000 cartons of this, that, and the other. And inevitably, you'll get the imported foods inspection will turn up on the 1 carton of
whatever it is.
I don't even want to name the product, but I just know that I've sat on that table out there creating nutritional panels and labeling up single jars of individual stuff. No, there's no rhyme or reason. It goes on what tariff code the stock is entered into on its way into Australia. So it doesn't matter if it's 1 carton or 1 million cartons. If you get pinged for a random inspection, that's the joy of it. So, but the trick to that is, I mean, your cost of labeling here in Australia is only 10 cents a label. So the investment's not large there. So that's where you cost that into your initial launch into the market. Right, I'm going to commit to labeling. That's just part of my doing business. And if you get to the scale of business that it's too much hassle to label, and that's fair enough, then that's when the UK investment has to come in at a certain economy of scale. You want to do it yourself in the UK.
Right. Okay.
Because every time you label it's double and triple.
So the Woolworths and the Coles and the Australian consumer are used to products that are being relabeled, etc. Yeah.
So, well, look, definitely in the international space, they're used to it, but you cannot put anything on the shelf with a UK nutritional label. So either you're doing it yourself and making it look good with professional bespoke packaging in the UK, or you're getting proper dedicated labels made in Australia. So I mean, we do a fairly professional job on labeling. For example, Iron Brew Energy, we do a label that covers, it's color coded. It doesn't have to be white and stand out like the American ones do, but it's still got to contain all the legislative information.
Okay, that's fine.
Great, that's fantastic. Thanks. I know you've got to shoot off, Dan, so I'm just conscious of the time. Don't want to keep you on, but yeah, if anyone else has got any questions or you think of anything afterwards, as Warren said, we'll circulate the presentations, and we can connect you, and you can ask questions direct, at any time. And so I just really wanted to thank you, Dan, and Warren. Thanks for the session today. It's great. It's hopefully the beginning of a long and profitable relationship for FDEA members and yourselves. And so thank you both very much. And also just a couple of shout outs that we've got 2 other market insight sessions coming up next Wednesday and Thursday the 16th on France. So again, one is a deep dive into organic and gourmet, and the other one is looking at how to manage a listing with retailers. So do sign up for those on our events page. And also for FDEA members, we've got our Friday meetup tomorrow at 10:30 on Zoom. So make sure you come along to that. And yeah, thanks again, and see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.